Great. Well, welcome everyone to Monday Night Ignite. We are thrilled to have you with us, and we are super excited to have Dr. Doug Corrigan join us again. Because if you've heard anything that Dr. Corrigan has put in front of us, you know how amazing he is and how grateful we are that he's in our camp, because he was a skeptic early on, shall we say. And because listen to this lineup, he has a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology, and a master's and bachelor's in physics. So usually when you come from those parts of the world, you can be a little skeptic about this essential oil use, right? But his wife convinced him, because demonstrated the benefits in their own home, and he's now dedicated his time to helping others like us understand the true science behind essential oils. So Dr. Doug is a Young Living executive leader, and tonight he will be demonstrating why it's important to protect the integrity of information carried by our DNA. And he'll be discussing the root causes of DNA degradation and natural products that help provide a defense mechanism against DNA damage. So I am all in to hear this. Very excited to have you, Dr. Doug. Welcome, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again in the Ignite group. Appreciate it. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. So my name's Doug Corrigan, and yes, that's true. In the background there, I was a skeptic. I was doing research in pharmaceutical science, started a biotech company, and we were developing novel drug discovery tools for the pharmaceutical industry to help them develop better antiretroviral medicines for HIV and drug-resistant forms of HIV. And so I was brought up in the Western paradigm of pharmaceutical science. And so since then, I've come up with a term for pharmaceutical science, which we're all accustomed to in the Western world, called monomolecular therapy, is what I call it. And I throw the word around therapy there. But essential oils, in my opinion, are really a form of polymolecular therapy, where you have more than one molecule working together synergistically in a team effort, which we call constituents that make up the blend of the essential oil. So that's polymolecular, but Western medicine's all based on one molecule that they mass produce and purify and put in a pill. So it's just one molecule. And so I call it monomolecular therapy. And there's a lot of downsides to that type of approach in medicine. But when I was involved with that type of research, it really wasn't apparent to me of why that was, because we were taught that was the way you do it. So once we got involved with essential oils in our home, mainly because my wife was using a lot of candles in the house, and I was allergic, or not allergic, but just got bad headaches from the artificial scents. Plus, I was afraid she was going to burn down the house with leaving all these candles burning all the time. Somebody introduced me to the fact that you could diffuse essential oils and get rid of all these artificial scents. So I bought my wife the premium starter kit at the time, and didn't really think more of it than just for that, But then she started using the oils in her home on our children. We had two girls, one that had some really serious issues and another one that has some serious issues as well, that we adopted. And she was able to bring both of their conditions into homeostasis in a very short period of time, where we have been using Western approach medicine, doctors and all of that failed and didn't bring any solution for years. So that kind of piqued my interest. And then I had some issues that came up in my life that Amy used the oils on, and I saw some miraculous things happen, what I would call miraculous, because it couldn't be explained by Western medicine, really. And so that's really what got me down the road of saying, okay, I got to stop being skeptical about these and start really studying the science behind them. So that's when I dug into the literature, I dug into the research, I dug into the journal articles, and really started understanding how they work. From there, I was able to put together classes to help other people understand how they're working and what they're doing. because it's not very apparent. It's not really talked about. People know essential oils work if you've used them, but a lot of people don't know why or how they work on a molecular cellular level. So that's why I wanted to be able to explain in a simple way that people could use the same teachings and teach others of how they work. So, so I developed classes around that, different topics, books, and all of that to help people understand. So tonight, what I'm going to be discussing is really the number one reason why I think everyone on the planet should use essential oils on a daily basis. So I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint. I do have a PowerPoint. So please forgive me. But I have a PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully it works. Please let me know if it's working. Good to go? All right, great. So you should all be able to see my screen. So the title of this class is called Protecting Your DNA. All right, so this is the number one reason why I think people should use essential oils. Now, when I started, my wife was experimenting on me with essential oils, and I still let her experiment on me. And I think if you're a real man, you will let your wife experiment on you with essential oils. And then once you see the benefits, you might become a believer like her. Men, for some reason, men always seem to be tagging along after the wife for some reason. In my case, it was because of my bias. But in other cases, I don't know what the main reason is, but it always seems like the man is lagging behind. But they always come around eventually. So it just takes time. So this is a book I wrote, How Do Essential Oils Work? Really goes over the basics and the concepts of how they work. Very basic level. Anyone can understand this book. Don't need a background in science. You can get this at starfishsense.com. I also have all of my classes on a memory stick format that I mail to you that has, a dozen or more classes on there, and each class has multiple modules to it. And then I have recipe sets that I've developed, designed, and I'll share some of those with you tonight, and as well as a frequently asked question database. And these are all on one memory stick. It has all the videos, it has all the slides. You're welcome to use in training or education. I just only ask that if you get this, you don't share the files with anybody in terms of sending it to them or leaving the files up on the internet or something like that. So, but you're welcome to use them to do training. So that's also at starfishsense.com. I will put in the chat box, I will put the link there. I just did that. So if you guys, there's a link to that. Okay, so what's the number one reason why people should use essential oils? Now, I think the most important biological molecule in the human body is DNA. And so the fact is that your DNA comes under attack millions of times in each cell on a daily basis, and the DNA has to be able to withstand that degradation that occurs naturally. And I'll share some of that with you today of why that's important. So DNA is extremely important to human life because it's the hard drive or the set of instructions that your body uses to build cells, build proteins, and function. It's the set of instructions. So think of it as the operating system on your hard drive, on your computer. It's information, it's instructions. It doesn't do anything metabolically in your cell. It's just instructions that are followed by your cells. So your cells actually read the instructions, translate the instructions, and follow the instructions. And a set of instructions within the DNA is called a gene. And so there's many genes in our DNA. And every cell in our body has the exact same copy of the DNA residing in the nucleus of the cell. 3 billion letters of code that make up the entire human genome. And those letters, there's only 4 letters that are used in the DNA alphabet, but those 4 letters are strung together in a sequence of 3 billion letters, and that forms the human genetic sequence. Those are the set of instructions that how to build the human body, how to keep the human body functioning on a daily basis. So if the instructions become corrupted, just like if your hard drive becomes corrupted or the instructions get, if there's an error introduced into the instructions, then your cells won't function properly because they're following the wrong instructions. It'd be like if somebody came into your computer and changed some of the code that's running your operating system. Now your operating system doesn't function properly. Now, if somebody takes your computer and then copies your hard drive and makes a copy of it, if the copy is not perfect, then that copy is going to have problems as well. Then if you copy the copy and there's more error introduced, you're going to have even more problems with the third generation computer, right? So the copying process has to be perfect to copy all of the instructions. Now, when our cells divide, they actually copies all of the instructions in that 3 billion letter code are perfectly copied into a new strand of DNA, and that DNA has to then separate into the new cell. If there's mistakes made in that copying process, that new set of instructions in that new cell, now that new cell is not functioning the way it should. That's why it's important. So the human body has about 30 trillion cells in it. It's a huge number. It's debated among scientists, it's somewhere between 30 trillion and 60 trillion cells. Obviously, they've never counted them all. So these are estimates. Nobody sat there with tweezers and counted all the cells. So, but in each cell, which is 50 millionths of a meter in diameter, 50 microns or 50 millionths. So you can't see it unless you have a microscope. If you look inside the cell, in the nucleus, which is even smaller than the cell, is all of the DNA. And it's wound up into coils, and it's packaged inside the nucleus so it doesn't get tangled. Now, if you were to take the DNA out of one cell and untangle it, unwind it, and stretch, into the strand that it is, think of it like a ball of yarn. If you were to take that ball of yarn and basically pull it apart into a strand, for one cell, it would be about 6 feet long. Which you might think of a microscopic cell you can't even see unless you have a microscope, but now you take the DNA out of it, and the DNA from that one cell is 6 feet long. That's all of the instructions, 3 billion letters in that code that form that 6 feet long strand. Now you take 30 trillion cells, each has a copy of the DNA. You do the math, and the DNA from your body, if you stretched it, lined it up end to end, would stretch 34 billion miles, all the way to Pluto and back 12 times, just from your body. And along that entire 34 billion mile path, there are microscopic, nano-sized letters that make up the chemical alphabet of the DNA. And so if those instructions are anywhere along that length of 34 billion miles becomes damaged, that means some cell in your body now has a damaged set of instructions. And if that cell starts to replicate and divide and copy itself, it can overtake the rest of the cells in your body, and now you have cancer, right? So this is why it's important. And you have premature aging, and you have all the health disorders. So you can trace all health disorders, all aging-related disorders to some kind of damage that's occurring in the DNA. And the damage that's occurring in the DNA is happening and being acquired over your lifetime. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens little by little by little, but the damage gets copied into the DNA, and then it gets copied into the next copy, into the next copy, as the cells form daughter cells, right, in your body. So you start with stem cells, and the stem cells become more mature and differentiate into some type of cell. So all the cells in your body are being replaced, right, except for certain cell types that really don't replace themselves. But most of the cells in your body, your skin, your heart, your lungs, all of that, they'll be replacing themselves at a certain rate. So that those cells are being built from precursor cells called stem cells. And those stem cells, if the DNA gets damaged in the stem cells, then all those copies of the cells are then have a degraded copy of the DNA residing in that cell. So this is why it's important to maintain the health and integrity and the fidelity of the initial data that you were given as a child in your DNA. Now, you're inheriting mutations in your DNA from your parents and your grandparents, your great-grandparents, that have been passed on along the generations. The DNA is not the original set of instructions that were first put here on Earth by God. So, therefore, the DNA that we've inherited over the generations already has mutations built into it. Now, there's other things that happen in the body and things that you consume and things we're exposed to that are adding to that damage or those mutations in our DNA. So another interesting fact, if another way to think about this, this could blow people's minds if you want to share this with them. It's absolutely true. If you took the DNA from your body, it would wrap around the Earth's equator 1.4 million times. So if you do the math, it's something like, since there's 3 billion pieces of information in each cell, that means you have in your total body 100 billion trillion chemical letters of information in your genetic code. 100 billion trillion. So in each cell, your DNA is constantly being attacked by different factors. And I'll go over some of those. But in each cell, approximately 1 million times per day, the DNA is being damaged. Some letter along that 34 billion mile path is being changed, or the chemical structure of it is being altered so that if you made a copy from that strand, the letter wouldn't be exactly what it should be, that's specified in the parent strand, because there's a chemical modification to it. So the copy becomes damaged at that position in the DNA. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. But you think about along in one cell, right, 1 million times each day, damage is occurring. So why aren't we all dead, right? With that level of damage, you would think the human body would not survive very much longer after you came out of the womb, right? And that's true. The reason we don't die is because we have an entire set of nanomachines that are constantly scanning the DNA for damage. These are DNA repair enzymes, and there's 130 of them in the human cell that all have different functions. These enzymes are actually, the instructions to make these enzymes are in the DNA. So there's 130 genes in the DNA that have this set of instructions to make each one of these nanomachines enzymes. And in here you can see one of these enzymes that's riding along the DNA, and it's scanning it. It's feeling the DNA, and it's sensing along that 3 billion letters if there's any damage anywhere. If it finds damage, then it sends out a signal, and it recruits other members to that location, other nanomachines that all begin to each play a role in cutting out the damage, copying the correct code in that location, gluing the pieces of DNA back together, and reassembling the code. Now, for somebody to think that all of this came to be by accident is just foolishness. So obviously this was designed. It's been engineered this way. So these enzymes, if any one of these enzymes is not functioning properly, then the DNA damage can accumulate at a faster rate in your cells. You're getting 1 million insults per day per cell. And so these enzymes are working all the time. And they're riding along the DNA at a pretty fast rate and scanning the DNA. And they each have a different function or role to play. And there's different types of repair enzymes that recognize and can sense different types of DNA damage. There's not just one type of chemical modification that can damage DNA. So there's different repair enzymes that are tuned to recognize certain types of damage. For example, ultraviolet light. So when you go outside in the sun, there's UVA, UVB, UVC. UVB can cause damage to your DNA. The UV light will actually, if there's two chemical letters called thymine together in the genetic code, the letter T, if you remember from high school biology, you had A, T, C, G, with your 4 letters that make up DNA. Well, T is thymine. If there's 2 thymines together in the DNA code and UV light hits it, the 2 thymines cross-link together and form what they call a thymine dimer. Okay, so if you have a thymine dimer, because of the UV light hitting it there, when that DNA is copied, the next copy doesn't know how to handle that thymine dimer, and it just places a random letter there where it should be. So you can quickly get a lot of DNA damage accumulating from exposure to UV rays. So we have enzymes in our cells, one of these 130 enzymes, that recognize specifically thymine dimers and cut out the thymine dimer and replace it and fix it, okay? So this is happening millions of times in each cell as you go outside. Now there's children that are born, just to show you how critical this is. There's children that are born that have a mutation in one of these DNA repair enzymes, one of the 130, and it's the enzyme that fixes the thymine dimers from UV light. And they go outside, and by the age of 5 to 10, depending on how much sunlight they get, they start to get skin cancer over their entire body. Okay, so if you think about it, if we didn't have these 130 repair enzymes working around the clock, we would all be dead. So we're constantly generating cancer in our body. This is, every cell is becoming cancerous all the time. It's just being fixed. Does that make sense? So I'll say that again. So all of the cells in our body at some point are becoming cancerous, but it's getting nipped in the bud before it can overtake our bodies because the DNA is being fixed. If repaired. If the repair machinery doesn't work properly, then those damage events will escape. You know, they're not recognized and they're not fixed. So then when the cell copies itself, it goes into the next generation of cells. So I have an image of that here. So you can see, you know, here's your DNA, and you have different genes along the DNA. These are just different sets of instructions. Now, let's say one of these genes, remember I said there's 130 genes that are just for the DNA repair enzymes. So let's say here, for example, gene number 3 has a set of instructions for one of those 130 DNA repair enzymes. Now, if the cell divides, so it copies the DNA, and let's say it makes a perfect copy, so you're here, okay? The next set, cell division. Now here comes some kind of oxidant or ultraviolet light or chemical mutagen that damages the DNA right here where this blue star is. So the genetic instructions right there have now been chemically modified, okay? If this doesn't get repaired by one of those DNA repair enzymes that are riding along the DNA, if it gets missed, then when the cell divides again, that's going to be, that mutation is going to be baked into the DNA, and there's no way to repair it after that because it doesn't recognize it as damage after it's been copied. After it's been copied, that's it. It's in you, that new set of instructions is now in the daughter strand. It's not recognized as damage anymore. Okay, so it's not going to get fixed at this point. It's got to be fixed here. Now, if this gene is one of the DNA repair genes, that means that gene right there may not work as good as it should. And so that DNA repair enzyme is not fixing further damages that occur to the DNA. So now, once this gets mutated to the point where it's non-functional or reduced function, depending on the mutation, right? If it's reduced its function or it's non-functional, that means that the rate at which you accumulate mutations in your DNA is now going to accelerate. Because now you have one of the genes that's supposed to be repairing the DNA not working. And so now when new insults occur, like you see here and here with the yellow, they bake into the system when it copies, and so it doesn't get caught. So mutations occur randomly in the sequence of DNA. By statistically, some portion of those will occur in one of these DNA repair enzymes. Okay, so, and when that happens, it depends on where it happens in this gene and how bad the mutation is. It depends on, you know, does it get fixed? But over your lifetime, depending on how many insults your DNA has seen and how well your enzymes are working and what kind of diet you had and what kind of chemicals you've been exposed to, etc., your rate of DNA damage may be different than someone else's. And so when you age, these DNA start to accumulate at a higher rate, okay? And the average cancer cell, when they sequence the DNA in a cancer cell, it has somewhere around 20,000 to 30,000 mutations along this DNA that have accumulated. So one mutation is not going to give anyone cancer, right? Uncontrolled cell growth is what cancer is. But tens of thousands of mutations occurring in the DNA can result. It kind of tips the scale in the favor of cancer. and now the DNA damage is too great. There's no way to repair it now. And so if the immune system doesn't catch that cancerous cell and kill it before it starts to grow and multiply, then cancer can take effect. So in our cells, there's actually two types of genes that control cell division and growth. So every cell is, growing, and then it divides into two cells, and then it goes into a quiescent state, and it doesn't divide for a while, and then it starts to divide again. So there's basically gas pedal genes, like you think of this car here. There's genes that are saying, okay, cell, it's time to divide, it's time to grow, it's time to divide, multiply. So we call that the gas pedal. Those are called oncogenes. So the genes that are like pushing on the gas pedal of a car or telling the cell to grow and divide are oncogenes. Then there's other types of genes that are like the brakes, telling the cell to stop dividing. So for example, if there's some kind of cellular damage to the cell, one of these brake proteins, which we call tumor suppressor genes, will go into action and say, halt, cell, stop dividing. We need to repair this damage before you do anything else, before you start copying any more DNA. Stop everything, stop the presses. The cell stops in its track because one of these tumor suppressor genes was activated. The damage is repaired. If the damage can't be repaired, the cell then makes a decision as if it should kill itself. So this is called apoptosis. So if a cell decides that it's time to take itself out of commission for the sake of the greater good, it will actually deconstruct itself and turn itself into the molecular components so that other cells can reuse the materials, the DNA, the proteins, the carbohydrates, the lipids, the fats, and everything will be reused. But the cell will commit suicide at that point if the damage can't be repaired. If it does repair the damage, then the cell will send a signal and the oncogenes will become active again and say, okay, damage has been repaired. You can continue to divide and multiply, and then the gas pedal genes are put on. So this balance between tumor suppressor genes and oncogenes is what keeps cell division in check, so that a cell just doesn't replicate and keep on growing into a massive tumor, right? This is why we have, a human body shape and our fingers look like this, is because there's interaction between genes that tell the cells when to grow and divide and genes to tell the cell to stop dividing. And that's what keeps everything in check. If this delicate balance between oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes is disrupted in any way because the instructions have been damaged in any one of these genes, and you have enough damage, then the gas pedal might be permanently stuck, or the brake may not work. And when that happens, the cell just uncontrollably divides. It doesn't know when to stop dividing, and that's when cancer sets in. And so all cancer is really a product of accumulated DNA damage in the cell. So what causes DNA damage? We have endogenous causes, meaning these are internal to your human body. So just living life, even if you ate a perfect diet and had no exposure to sunlight or UV rays or X-rays or gamma rays or cosmic rays or nuclear radiation, even if you had no exposure and you had perfect diet, you would still have DNA damage, because the process of cells metabolizing food in the mitochondria generates what they call reactive oxygen species. And those reactive oxygen species, just from normal cellular metabolism, can break down and cause damage to DNA. But the DNA repair enzymes and the antioxidants we have in our cells should take care of that. But sometimes things seep through, right? Carcinogens, which are just cancer-causing agents found in food, air, water, chemicals, smoke, pollution, ionizing radiation like UV light, chronic inflammation. So if your immune system is active in a state of inflammation, your immune system or white blood cells are actually generating what they call reactive oxygen species, ROS, and those reactive oxygen species are basically being emitted from the white blood cells and bathing your tissues in reactive oxygen species. Those reactive oxygen species then can damage DNA. So inflammation in the body, this is why people that have chronic inflammation have higher rates of cancer, because the reactive oxygen species are accelerating the damage of their DNA. And then free radicals and reactive oxygen, oxidants and reactive oxygen species that we're exposed to in our diet and the chemical milieu that surrounds us every day from our Western culture and everything else. So let's talk about reactive oxygen species. What are those? So reactive oxygen species, ROS, is a molecule that wants to steal electrons away from another molecule. It's very electron, it's like a bully. So it walks up to a molecule and says, hey, give me your electron. Remember, all molecules are just made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. There's only 3 types of particles that make up all molecules: protons, neutrons, and electrons. The electrons are existing on the outside of the molecule. And so the reactive oxygen species comes up to the molecule and says, hey, give me one of your electrons. And the reactive oxygen species wins because it loves electrons more than the molecule does. It has a greater affinity for the electron, and it steals the electron away from the molecule. Now, this stealing away of the electron leaves this molecule in a very precarious condition. It's now considered a free radical. All right, so this molecule now is a free radical. This molecule is not going to function properly with one of its electrons stolen. It's been oxidized. So oxidation, when we say something's oxidated, the oxidation process really just means stealing an electron away from it. So this molecule has been oxidized by this molecule here, the reactive oxygen species. It strips electrons away. Now, if this reactive oxygen species steals an electron away from this molecule is now missing an electron. It can't steal one from the ROS back because the ROS is stronger. So it looks to someone else that is not as strong. You know, like if a bully went out and stole lunch money from a kid, then the kid went and said, okay, now I don't have lunch money. Let me go steal lunch money from somebody weaker than me. So this molecule is now going to steal an electron away from molecule 2. Molecule 2 can't get it from molecule 1, so he goes to molecule 3, he steals one. And so it's a chain reaction. So one reactive oxygen species will create a chain reaction in the cell that usually will start, somewhere on the outside of the cell where the lipids are, and work its way in to the cell towards the nucleus where the DNA is. So it starts this chain reaction. Eventually, it ends up, if it doesn't get caught by an antioxidant, the DNA ends up being the recipient and the electron stolen from the DNA. And when that happens, the DNA is now damaged at that location, and now when it goes to copy the DNA, the instructions get altered at that position. Okay, so you want to stop oxidative damage of DNA. So I already discussed the endogenous sources of DNA damage. One is just a normal process of metabolic functioning in your cell to create energy produced by nature, reactive oxygen species. Now we have things in our cells that take care of that. We have enzymes in our cells. There's 3 different ones that will neutralize the reactive oxygen species that are generated from metabolic processes, so that we don't end up damaging our own DNA. But those enzymes don't always work, especially if those enzymes have now been mutated by another event, and now they're not working properly. And so now our own endogenous processes is damaging our own DNA, even if we ate a perfect diet, right? And then pathway number 2 is our immune system, which I already talked about earlier. If you have inflammation and your immune system is activated, then those white blood cells are basically bathing your tissues, wherever they're located at, with reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species, another type of molecule, and that's damaging those cells. If it's chronic inflammation, that means that it's happening 24/7 around the clock, and so your cells are in a high oxidative state all the time from your own immune system. And this is going to cause premature aging, accelerated aging, wrinkles, the whole aging phenomenon is being driven by this. So you've heard of telomeres at the end of the DNA. Each strand of DNA has telomeres, which are the ends, and every time the DNA replicates itself, those ends shorten. And when the ends get too short, then the cell goes into a state called senescence, and then that cell can't divide anymore. Now you have a tissue that can't regenerate itself. So this is all part of the aging process. But if you can slow down oxidative damage to your cells and to your DNA, you can slow down the aging process. So this is what I call the Ross cycle, meaning you have reactive oxygen species, which themselves cause inflammation in the tissue, okay? And then this can lead to chronic inflammation, and the chronic inflammation or the activated white blood cells can then generate more reactive oxygen species, and then that will cause more tissue damage and then more inflammation, and just a bad cycle. Over time, as this cycle occurs, there's mutations occurring in the DNA, and there's a certain threshold that's reached with the tumor suppressor, the oncogenes, right? And the cell doesn't know when to stop dividing because that control is lost because the instructions are basically compromised. And now you have uncontrolled cell growth that introduces itself. Now, cancerous tissue will generate more reactive species and cause more inflammation. So now it enters into the cycle. So this is like the downhill cycle. So that's some of the endogenous inflammation, our own metabolic processes, but there's also things that come outside our body, things we put in our body, the chemicals we use on a daily basis, like lotions and shampoos and all of that stuff that we put on our slather on our body, all the foods that we eat, all the processed foods that we eat, all the pesticides we consume, solvents we may be putting on our body, heavy metals we're being introduced to, all these things generate reactive oxygen species and up the rate at which DNA is being damaged in our body. So what can happen is these reactive oxygen species that I described will damage like the lipids on the outside. They'll damage proteins in your cell, oxidize the proteins, oxidize the lipids in your cell, oxidize the enzymes in your cells, the things that are doing all the work. And then eventually the DNA, which that's the worst kind because that gets baked into the genetic code and you can't get rid of it. Accelerates the aging process. Now, damage to your proteins, damage to enzymes, that can be overcome because proteins and enzymes are remade every time. Those are remade all the time. In each cell, a protein doesn't exist forever. It only maybe lasts a few hours. And then the cell generates a new copy of the protein from the instructions. That's true for enzymes and proteins, lipids. Those are all constantly being resynthesized. So if those get oxidatively damaged, no big deal. They're going to be replaced with a pristine copy in a short period of time in your cell. But once the DNA gets damaged, and it doesn't get repaired, then it's baked in permanently. So inflammation and reactive oxygen species, this can lead to all kinds of aging problems, autoimmune conditions, Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative disorders, arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, premature aging, heart disease, inflammation of your vessels in your cardiovascular system, and then hardening and plaques and arteries of all that type of damage. Your liver can now be damaged, okay? Your liver is potentially sensitive, very sensitive to oxidative damage. Your kidneys as well. So all these body systems is taking a toll on all of that. So what is, this is the chain reaction, right? Now, how does an antioxidant work? So an antioxidant, what it does is the reactive oxygen species, remember, stole an electron away from molecule 1. Molecule 1 is now missing an electron. And it's going to want to steal one from molecule 2, and that's going to cause that chain reaction to go all the way to the DNA. But what if there's a molecule over here called an antioxidant that loves to give away electrons, donate one? So this antioxidant here will donate an electron to molecule 1 after it was stolen and make molecule 1 happy. It's got its electron back, so it won't want to steal one from molecule 2. And so because of that, the chain reaction is now broken. Or the antioxidant come right here at the source and give one to the reactive oxygen species and make the bully happy to begin with, and it'll never steal one from molecule 1. Now, the antioxidant is missing an electron now because it just donated one. So wouldn't it start a chain reaction now because it's missing one? The answer is no. And the reason is because the antioxidant is actually perfectly happy to be missing an electron, and it doesn't want to steal one away from someone else. And I'll explain why here in a second. But we have natural antioxidants in our cells. Glutathione is a perfect example. Glutathione is something made by our cells. It's actually a tripeptide, so it's a really small protein, but it's a natural antioxidant. You can take reduced glutathione. You can take N-acetylcysteine, NAC. N-acetylcysteine, you can get a supplement, N-acetylcysteine. It's a precursor to synthesize glutathione. And then glutathione is a great antioxidant because it sits at the base of the redox pyramid. So it's basically helping the whole redox system in your cells and keeping you in a low oxidative state. Glutathione is a great supplement to take. Take reduced glutathione, and you can take N-acetylcysteine in addition to that, and that will boost your antioxidant level capacity in your cells. Your body also makes other antioxidants like uric acid. Bilirubin is an antioxidant. Remember I said there was 3 enzymes that your body make that neutralize those reactive oxygen species from your cells just doing normal metabolic processes? Well, here's the name of those 3 enzymes. So those enzymes are antioxidants. The vitamins, some of the vitamins we take, vitamin A, C, and E, are great antioxidant molecules. Flavonoids come from fruit and vegetables and grains, right, from plant matter. These are great antioxidants. Coenzyme Q10, and then carotenoids, from carrots. Beta carotene, these are great antioxidants as well. This is just some examples, okay, of antioxidants. But what I want to share with you tonight, and this is the first question I asked, which is, what's the number one reason everyone should use essential oils on a daily basis? And this is the answer, is because essential oils are the best antioxidants on the planet. Even more so than the other things that I shared with you. And the question is why? Okay, so what makes a good antioxidant? Remember, an antioxidant wants to donate an electron to someone else, right? But after it donates the electron, it has to be happy. It can't, it can't then steal an electron away from someone else. It just defeated the purpose of being an antioxidant. So, I'm just watching the time here, make sure I'm good. So this molecule right here, you don't have to be a chemist or anything to understand what I want to show you here. You see right here, there's 2 lines, and then there's a single line, and then there's 2 lines and a single line. Okay, so this is just the molecular structure of this molecule. This is beta carotene, okay? This is the molecular structure of beta carotene. You can see double bond and then a single bond, and double and a single. When you have that pattern of double bonds with single bonds, and then a double and a single, that's called a conjugated bond system. Chemists call that a conjugated bond system. And when you have a conjugated bond system, that molecule is happy to donate an electron and be perfectly stable when that electron is given away. Okay, so conjugated bond system is perfectly happy missing an electron, so it makes perfect antioxidant. Another type of molecular structure that can give an electron away and be perfectly happy is this type of structure here on the right called a phenolic ring. It's like this ring right here, and you see there's a double bond, then a single, then a double, then a single, then a double. And it's just basically in a circle instead of in a line here, right? So those 2 types of molecular structure, the phenolic ring and the conjugated bond system, make great antioxidant type molecular structures. Now, if you look at the universe of the molecules that are inside essential oils, the constituents that make up the essential oils, the terpenoids, you've heard of monoterpenes and diterpenes and sesquiterpenes and triterpenes. Those molecules are basically built on the structure of a conjugated bond system or phenolic rings. All right, so baked into the chemistry of essential oils is the basic building unit of terpenoids or terpene molecules that make up essential oil molecules. This is called isoprene. And you see isoprene, this is the basic building block. It has a double bond, a single, then a double. It's this little one block. Okay. Now imagine connecting multiple of these together to form different molecules. So you took 3 of these isoprene and connected. Well, there's lots of different ways you can connect these things together in space. If you have 3, if you have 4, there's even more combinations. If you have 5, there's even more. Now each isoprene unit has 5 carbons in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you're putting together isoprene units in blocks of 5, that's what forms your different types of essential oil molecules. Here's isoprene, it has 5 carbons. If you put 2 isoprenes together, you have 10 carbons, C10. That's called a monoterpene. If you add another block of isoprene, now you have 15. Sesquiterpenes have 15 carbons. These are larger and larger molecules, okay? When you get to 4 isoprene units, you're now at 20 carbon bonds. This is called a diterpene. Then they go to the next level. They don't break down the middle with the 25. They just go right to 30 to name it. So it's a triterpene. It has 30 carbons in it. Then there's tetraterpenes that have 40 carbons. And you can imagine as these molecules get bigger, you have even more and more combinations of how these isoprene units can come together. So you get tens of thousands of different constituents that make up the universe of constituents that are in all of the essential oils. Okay, putting into these categories. So these are just categories, but in each category, like sesquiterpene, there might be 2,500 different sesquiterpenes, and there might be 15,000 different tetraterpenes. Okay, so we don't even know all of them because this universe is so large of these molecules. But the plants are synthesizing these molecules from this basic isoprene unit. Now, baked into this isoprene unit is this double, single, double bond. So when you connect multiple of these together, you get this conjugated bond system. Boom, 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 double, single, double, single. I'll show you here. Here's 4 isoprene units, and I'm just rotating them like this, okay? Now let's connect them together. Boom. You have a constituent of an essential oil. This is one constituent. And you can see it has a double bond, a single, double, single, double. Conjugated bond system. So this is what forms your antioxidant activity of the essential oil molecules, is that conjugated bond system. And the phenolic rings. Remember I showed you the rings do that as well. ORAC values. You've heard of the ORAC values. I'll just quickly go through this. ORAC is pretty much not considered to be a very good indicator of antioxidant activity. It's one indicator, but it's not the best indicator. It's not a universal indicator of antioxidant activity. Everybody reports the ORAC score. Well, the ORAC score is really just a little reaction in a test tube done one way. And you can think of all the different types of thousands of molecules in our cells and the different ways something can be oxidized. The ORAC system is really only measured one very specific chemical pathway and a molecule's ability to block that one oxidative pathway. And so if it's really good on the ORAC score, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good as an antioxidant in other types of pathways in the cell. It's a very narrow definition. So I'll give you an example here. This graph right here is basically, I know it's hard to read, but you start on the left with clove, and you have myrrh, citronella, coriander, fennel, clary sage, German chamomile. These are the ORAC scores. So you see clove has the best ORAC score, over 1 million. And then the next is myrrh, which is 379,000. Now, if you look at thyme and oregano on here, they're down here at 15,000 on the ORAC score, where these 2 red arrows are. Okay? Very low on the ORAC score. But if you measure a different type of chemical reaction for antioxidant activity called the Trolox, you see that thyme and oregano are almost as good as clove in this system. Okay, see how high it is? So you get different antioxidant scores depending on the type of reaction you do in the test tube. And so the point I want to make is in a cell, it's very complicated what's going on inside the cell. There's different antioxidant reactions that occur, different types, and ORAC only measures one type. Okay, so getting a complete picture of the antioxidant activity of an oil is important. So what ways can we reduce oxidative stress on our body? Well, obviously, removing toxic chemicals we're exposed to in our diet and the things we put in our products that we put on our body, cleaning products, personal care items, hygiene, makeup, all of that can be switched to more natural plant-based systems, right? Once you do that, you remove a big component or contributor to oxidative damage to your DNA, removing that. These are things that are not going to have an overnight impact. They're going to have an impact over decades, right? Because you're trying to slow down this DNA damage. So when you get to be 60 years old, you're not living the life of an 80-year-old, right? So you're trying to slow things down by doing things and doing it consistently over time, right? Exercising will reduce oxidative stress in your body, even if you just do it a few times a week. Maintaining a healthy weight, obesity, fat tissue, adipose tissue releases adipokines and chemokines that are inflammatory in the body, and they can cause chronic inflammation. Inflammation causes oxidative stress, right? So being overweight, having fat tissue will actually put your body in a state of oxidative stress. So controlling your weight. Aromatherapy can de-stress, because psychological stress created by the brain, actually puts your body into an oxidative state as well, which accelerates the rate of DNA damage. So just aromatherapy and relaxing and the benefits that it has by diffusing essential oils can have a huge effect on putting your body into a lower oxidative state. Reducing inflammation is huge, because remember the raw cycle with the chronic inflammation, how it self-generates itself, perpetuates itself. You want to get inflammation under control as well. I have a whole class on inflammation, so I won't go over that. But anti-inflammatory foods and compounds and supplements. And then using antioxidants, or bringing into your body molecules that have antioxidant capabilities, right? Like essential oil molecules, right? So there's thousands of chemical pathways involved in oxidative damage, depending on the biomolecules and the pathway that's taken, right? Where in the cell, what type of proteins, what's being oxidized. So there's not just one oxidative reaction. They all have one thing in common, that an electron is being stolen, but there's different ways molecules bump into each other and how they steal that electron away. So one antioxidant type of molecule isn't going to suffice. So you just can't take vitamin A because it's a good antioxidant, or vitamin C, and say that's going to take care of all, or glutathione, and say that's going to take care of all my oxidative stress needs. So since there's thousands of chemical pathways involved in oxidative stress, you should have hundreds or thousands of molecules involved in antioxidant neutralization of those chemical pathways. So this is what essential oils offer. If you think about essential oil, it's a mixture of constituents, different constituents. So an average essential oil can have anywhere from 20 to 300 different constituents, just a single 300 constituents. And each one of those constituents has some level of antioxidative capacity, right? But it's each one of those molecules, because it's different, is interacting with a different oxidative pathway, right? You're not putting all your eggs in one basket. We're working together as a team with synergy, right? So this is why you're blocking pathways from different directions simultaneously. This is why essential oils are the most powerful antioxidant on the planet. It's not because they have any one great antioxidant molecule in them. It's because they have a mixture of different novel chemical features based on the arrangement of all these different constituents from the isoprene units I told you that have this built-in conjugated bond structure. And because of that, you really have a diverse richness of antioxidant capacity in each oil. So the key now is diversity and rotate the different types, so your body is seeing different types. So how do you minimize oxidative stress using essential oils? Well, a good way to do that is make a list of single oils that you like with antioxidant. They're pretty much all going to have antioxidant capabilities. Make a list of oils that you want to rotate. Use one oil or blend per day. If you use a blend no more than 3. You don't have to do more than 3 oils. So you blend 3 together, and then have 7 different ones, and just use one each day. Have 7 days of the week. Apply on the back of your ear and on the bottom of your feet and in your abdomen if you want to use your abdomen. The reason I'd say the feet or the abdomen is because it slowly releases the molecules into your bloodstream. So you have like a time release effect because of the thick pad on your foot or the adipose tissue, in your abdomen. So it's going to slowly release. So you put it on, and now you have that antioxidant protection for 12 hours or more because it's being slowly released into your bloodstream. You just put it behind your ear or your wrist, it goes away in a couple hours. It'll peak in 20 minutes and be gone in a couple hours, so that you're not getting around the clock protection. So if you're going to use oils on a daily basis for antioxidant protection, you want to do your feet and maybe your abdomen, okay? You can still do it behind your ears or something, but don't just use that solely. Dilute in a carrier oil. More is not necessarily better. Diversity and rotation is the key. I designed 7 recipes. We try to bring synergy and diversification based on a lot of different factors, the ORAC score, the TROLOC scores, and try to give a good range of diversity here in the set that I designed. But you can do this yourself too. It's not, it's not something, you're not going to mess it up, basically. But if you want to use the recipes that I've designed, I have a rollerball set that has 7 bottles that are already labeled Monday through Sunday. They have the labels applied, and then there's 7 recipe cards, and you just make up the blends the way the recipe cards say, and then you just use each one of these bottles on the bottom of your feet or your abdomen every day. If you can get this class too, if you'd like, I have the video and the slides called Protecting Your DNA class. If you get the DNA class, it also comes with the digital file for all the recipes. If you want to make up your own recipes in your own bottles and you don't want to use these bottles, that's fine too. Or you can just make up your own recipes like using the method I just showed you. This is all included on the memory stick too, the recipes and the class along with all these other classes. So I think I'm out of time now. So I'm going to go. It's now 8:00, so the next speaker is going to be coming on. So I'll put in the chat the link if you guys want it. And then I don't know if there's time for quick questions or not, but I'll let Stacy figure that out. Thank you.
I think we don't, but that was phenomenal, Dr. Doug. Thank you so very much. Like I take my video off because I'm taking notes like a mad woman. So thank you so much for, I love all the science that you provide and the massive education that you give us. So we just really want to say thank you. This is your 3rd time, if not 4th time being with us, I believe, right? 4th time. So we just eat it up, and thank you for being so willing to share your knowledge and research with us so we can educate ourselves as well as help educate others. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. All right. So we're going to have, we want to have you guys back here right now. And first things first, there is no class next week. No.